Deadpool and Wolverine from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Walt Disney Company is coming out of the gate very strong, just as we predicted, and many others predicted in the last several weeks. The numbers that they are turning in continue to climb through the weekend, and this may just be the biggest thing that Disney Marvel has done since Endgame. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday and Wednesday afternoon right here on Valiant Renegade for the live show at 6 p.m. Eastern. The final weekend estimates are coming in for Deadpool and Wolverine, and they are even more surprising than we or many others had possibly anticipated. It seems that the highest estimates even out there coming in at 180 to 190 million were lowballing. It looks right now that Deadpool and Wolverine are going to comfortably breach the $200 million domestic marker. This according to Anthony D'Alessandro at Deadline magazine. On the heels of a killer Saturday night in Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con for Marvel, the Sean Levy directed, produced, and written Deadpool and Wolverine grossed $61.5 million on Saturday, as per Disney, for what is definitely a $205 million opening weekend, just like we told you back in June per Quorum. There's bound to be even more cash. Some felt it wasn't possible for an R-rated movie, but here we are. Global currently stands around $438 million. It is the unadjusted 8th highest opening of all time, one of 9 films to open north of $200 million, 6 of them belonging to Marvel Studios. It's also the 5th biggest opening ever for a superhero film. In addition to opening records, as we told you for Sean Levy, Hugh Jackman, and Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool and Wolverine also notched the biggest July opening of all time, ahead of The Lion King at $191.8 million. Now, a brief pause right there to explain a few things. Again, remember, The Lion King opened in the pre-COVID era. It's been 5 some odd years since that film came out, I believe, in 2019. Now, the issue with that film, however, is that we don't have an adjusted figure in this article for what it would be today. If we put the same number of butts in seats and then comfortably, reasonably adjusted ticket prices up some 30 to 40% as they have been since 2019, the opening weekend for The Lion King would probably look even closer to $300 million potentially if all those same people showed up and paid the ticket prices that they're paying today in 2024 for Deadpool and Wolverine. And you can see here, as per intelligence, Deadpool and Wolverine clocked in 13.6 million admissions. They say stateside. Now, I don't know if they meant domestic in terms of the domestic theatrical market, which would also include Canada, basically all of North America, minus Mexico. But as it stands right now, they're calling this stateside. That may just be 13.6 million in the U.S. The last time a film reached 13 million patrons in a 3-day stretch was July of 23 with Barbie at 13.1. Only Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, 13.8 million admissions, and Spider-Man No Way Home at 20 million plus admissions have had more post-pandemic. And if you recall, particularly with Spider-Man No Way Home, that opening weekend clocked in close to $260 million plus dollars. So you can see the big difference there in the admissions. And those admissions for Spider-Man No Way Home had far more similar pricing per ticket, although it was still lower than it is today, but still much more closely priced, as that movie only came out about 2 to 3 years ago now. And if we look at Nancy Tartaglione's article from Deadline magazine covering the international market for Deadpool and Wolverine, she says it's on a tear, quote unquote, 438 plus million global opening, biggest R-rated debut ever. The international box office portion, she says, is estimated to be $233 million. And that is something just like the domestic total that we expect to see climb once the final actual figures are in, because this movie has completely outsized its own lofty expectations coming into the weekend. Typically, when we see this, the estimates continue to fall behind actuality until those numbers come out, say Monday or Tuesday. So if they're calculating roughly $438 million globally now, it wouldn't at all surprise me if they're behind by a couple of 2 or 3%, meaning that this movie could easily be over $450 million for its opening 3-day frame by the time we get those final numbers. Overseas, where all the markets open, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman front the #1 non-local movie everywhere. The Start, excluding China, where the previous 2 Deadpool films did not release, is 56% ahead of Deadpool and 50% above Deadpool 2. Deadpool and Wolverine is also 37% ahead of Joker. Now, again, Joker came out just before the lockdown that shut theaters off for about a year and a half. And again, if we do a reasonable update to butts and seats ticket prices, then the Joker and Deadpool and Wolverine perhaps are far more in line with what they're suggesting here in unadjusted, meaning no inflation given account here. So those 2 movies seem to be fairly similar in that regard, but a 50 to 57% performance above and beyond the first 2 Deadpool movies respectively is very admirable. Again, although if we inflation adjusted those first 2 Deadpool films for their comparative opening in today's ticket prices, those numbers are going to be a lot closer, although it does seem that Deadpool and Wolverine have fairly well outperformed them nonetheless, maybe to at least the tune of 10 to 15% more ticket sales themselves, not in dollars, but an actual number of tickets. And that's quite frankly something that we have talked about here on Valiant Renegade a number of times. It hasn't been about the overall box office revenue of the MCU since phases 4 and 5 began. It's really the number of butts in seats, because we have such an enormous amount of ticket price inflation. Again, somewhere now to the tune of, say, 40% at least since 2019. Just look at what you were paying for movie tickets back in 2018 and 2019 versus today. You're going to see that increases right there. More people see films in IMAX and premium large format screens. That drives it up as well. The problem for Marvel has been not so much the revenue, although that has definitely been a problem considering their enormous budgets on these films that typically well exceed $200 million just to complete production. That doesn't include usually another 100 to 150, in some cases more, $1 million in marketing expenses to put these things into theaters. Marvel had lost a tremendous amount of their audience from 2021 until now, even though the revenues seemed somewhat similar for some of these films. The real issue for Marvel and for Deadpool and Wolverine is this going to translate into a renewed interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? It wasn't an accident this weekend that they timed the release of Deadpool and Wolverine with the big reveals at the San Diego Comic-Con. It's basically the biggest superhero and nerd convention out there that exists on planet Earth, or at least one of the very biggest. And of course, there were some very big reveals this weekend with folks like Robert Downey Jr. rejoining the fray, although not in the capacity that one would think. Will this actually bode well for things like Captain America Brave New World that comes out in the summer of next year? There's a long leg between now and then. Will this movie actually get fan interest to spill over? I have had my doubts, and I continue to do so. And the reason is because this movie is drawing the massive crowds that they are because of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and because of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. That's the draw here. People love the Deadpool franchise. It's become quite a thing. And again, having it be the biggest R-rated experience out there in theaters that we've ever had, short of maybe inflation adjusting big things like The Passion of the Christ that continue to re-release year over year, but a very different genre, obviously. It is something to behold. And yes, it's great news for the Walt Disney Company, just like Inside Out 2 was. The problem is we're not sure yet whether Disney and Marvel and the rest of the Disney studios can actually sustain this momentum from here, or have they had a couple of one-offs? Stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that more on the live show today. This movie right now has a reported $200 million production budget, but we've seen those kind of numbers before with Disney Fare, and they often turn out to be incredibly lowballed. But bear in mind, the first two Deadpool movies came in at around $50 and $100 million respectively. Now this one is clocking in at $200 million. Certainly, I would expect it to cost more than the second one because the price of everything now is radically higher than it was 5 or 6 years ago when the last one was made. But did they really hit a $200 million mark? Assuming that they did, then that means a $450 million global opening weekend would have basically already paid back Disney's entire production costs, although we still have a little ways to go when it comes to recovering their marketing costs, but they shouldn't have an issue doing that. The question is, how far will this movie go? At $450 million, it's already made more than half of the money that the first two Deadpool movies made in their entire runs. This movie should easily breach $1 billion, maybe push close to $1.5 billion if it can really get to a 3x leg out over its opening weekend, which I think is entirely possible as fan reception for this seems to be very, very good. Stay tuned. We'll talk more about this on the live show today and in future videos. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. And until then, take care.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.